level J, list 7, and we're doing the day 1. And here we're looking at the SE on the end of these words and the LY on the end of these ones. So let's colour them in. The SE on the end here and the LY on the bottom ones. So when we add ly to a word, it commonly changes a word into an adverb. So it tells us how we might be performing a verb. That's when we add to the verb. So if you've got another colour handy, pull it out now. And we can see some other things happening in these words. We've got the OU in mouse and house, the OR in horse that we're revising. The E making the previous vowel long, so we've got I, the E making the I say I, the A say A, the A say A. We've got the long E sound with the EA here. Here we've got the IGH for the long I sound. Remember that's these ones with that GH after the I are from Old Germanic, and we can't make that guttural sound that sounds like someone's going to spit or vomit on us, so we leave it out when we say it. So we go lit, but when we write it we have to put those 2 letters in because they come from another language. We have to acknowledge them in the word. So I can't say it well, but in Old German it would be something like lit, and you'd give that guttural sound there, but we leave it out. Here in fair, you've got the air sound A-I-R. So let's have a look at why these words are spelt the way they are. So we put the E on the end of mouse, house and horse because initially when they had, I'm going to use up some of this space down the bottom to write on. You'll be using it to do your spelling the words 3 times, but I'm just going to use it to show you this. So initially when they had words and they were working out how to spell them, they decided that if they put an S on the end of a word, it would make it mean more than one. It would change it from singular to plural form. So if we only have one cat, we'd say cat. But if we have more than one, we say cats. And we commonly add an S to the end of a word to make it plural, to make it mean more than one. So when they got to words like mouse and horse, they thought, well, if they see mouse spelt like that, they might think it's lots of mouses or lots of mice because it ends with an S. So house, they thought, oh no, they might think it's lots of houses because it ends with an S. So they decided to put an E after the S to show that it's only one, to make it singular. So that's the only reason some of these words have an E after the S, is just to show that they're singular. Quite often when we see SE on other words, we know it's to make the Z sound at the end of a word, like because. So this is for a different reason that we have the SE on these particular ones. So if we want mouse, that's an irregular plural. So if we want to make that into a plural, we'd have to actually write mice. But house, if we want to say houses, we would add the S at the end. Horses, we'd add the S at the end. Now on these ones, nicely, safely, bravely, neatly, tightly, brightly, fairly, we're adding the ly to form an adverb. So you might say, he eats nicely, or he speaks nicely. She walks safely across the road. He bravely walked past the dog or fought the fire, or whatever it might be. Neatly, when you do something that's very neat. Okay, so that's why we have those bits added on. It's generally, most commonly, changes a word into an adverb, which makes a verb more interesting in a sentence. Now let's have a look at what these words mean. Now, a mouse could mean a little animal that you might have at home or running around, might see running around in a bush. It could also mean one of those little devices that you use with a computer to be able to navigate your way around. But that's an acronym. The mouse for a computer is an acronym for manually operated utensil. I can't remember the other bits, you can look it up. House is where we live. It's a building, which usually is a home for people. A horse is an animal that you might see on a farm. Once upon a time they were used a lot for travel and for work, to pull ploughs and machines. Nicely means you're doing something that is nice. Safely means that you're doing something that is safe. Bravely means you're being brave. Neatly, you're doing something that is neat. Tightly means that something is too tight, pants fitted tightly. Brightly is like the sun shines brightly. And fairly might be when you're playing nicely and you're a very fair person, you're playing fairly. So quite often these words, if they're adverbs, describe a verb. Okay, let's read the words down the words and spell the words. So don't you write any of this on your page, that's only for me to teach you what to do, why we've spelt those words the way they are. Let's go through these words and read, write, spell and check them. So we've got mouse, 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 mouse. M-O-U-S-E, M-O-U-S-E, M-O-U-S-E. Cover it and write it. Now, if you can add a little bit of rhythm to the letters as you spell them, it helps your brain to remember them more easily. Okay, house, 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 house. H-O-U-S-E, H-O-U-S-E, H-O-U-S-E. So get that bit of rhythm happening in the spelling, writing your words on the line and checking them at the end to make sure you've spelt them. So you can continue on. Make sure you haven't written my stuff on your page so you can write the words 3 times all the way to the bottom. This is level J, list 7, and we're doing the day 2. And our words are mouse, house, horse, nicely, safely, bravely, neatly, tightly, brightly, fairly. So usually when we add ly to the end of a base word, it forms an adverb. So that's a nice cheat for you. In a test, look for the word that ends in ly if you need to find an adverb. And if you need to write an adverb, think of a good word to describe what you're doing that you can just add ly to. So on these ones here, the reason we have an E on the end of them is not because we need it to make the previous vowel long, because you can see these vowels are already long. Ow, ow, or. They're already long vowel sounds. Now the reason we have the E on the end of these words is because when they were working out how we were going to spell words, they already had decided that if you had one cat, you would write it like that, cat. And if you had lots of cats, more than one, you would write, the plural form would be cats, and all we'd do is add an S to the end of it. But when they got to words that ended with an S, like horse, or house or mouse, they thought, well, we've got a long vowel sound here. We don't need the E to make a long vowel sound. If we write horse like that, though, and it ends in an S, people might think it's the plural form. It means that there's lots of horses or lots of houses. So they decided to make sure that people knew it was only one, they would add the E to the end of that word. And then if you wanted to make it into a plural, you'd have to put an S after the E. So it makes a lot of sense, really. Now, in all of these words here too, or a lot of these, we've got a long vowel sound in nice. The E is making the previous vowel make its long sound. And also, it's a very busy E here because it's also making the C say S. So we quite often use CE at the end of a word to make the S sound. Now safely, we've got the E making the A make a long sound. Bravely, we've got the E making the A make a long sound. Here we've already got a long sound in the EA. The IGH makes a long I sound in this one and this one. and in this one, air, is A-I-R. Now the reason we have the GH in these two is because they're from Old Germanic, so we can't make that guttural sound. It sounds like someone's going to spit or vomit on you, and we find that sound difficult to make, so it would be like a hock sound. So because we can't make it easily, we leave those letters out when we say the sounds that those letters make. We leave that out when we say the words, but when we write them, we have to put them in because we've taken these words from another language and added them to our English language. So let's look at reading, sounding and spelling these words and writing them. So we've got mouse, mouse, M-O-U-S-E, cover it, write it, and go back and check that you've spelt them correctly. You can do those on your own. Now let's look at the meanings of these words so that you can do this crossword. So a mouse is a little animal it's a type of rodent that we may see in our homes or in our gardens. A house is a building that we live in. A horse is an animal that we can ride. Nicely is when we do something that makes other people happy or we're doing something well. Safely is when we do something that's not dangerous, so we do it in a safe way. Bravely is when we're pretty tough and we do something without being too worried about it, so we do it with courage. Neatly is when everything is tidy and in order. Tightly is the opposite to loose, so if the shoes fitted tightly, it means that they would be very snug on our feet. They wouldn't be loose at all. Brightly means that something is very shiny and the sun shines brightly. Fairly is when you play nicely with someone, so you're a fair person, so you play fairly. And you might, if you had lollies or something, you might divide them up so that everyone got the same number. So let's have a look at what the clues are in our crossword. So if you're going across, you must write the words going across in the crossword, and the down hints are for words going down. So there's a number next to each definition. You've got to write the word in next to that number. One letter in each square. So not loosely would be tightly. So we've got to find number 3 and write it across. One letter in each box, remember. Not loosely is tightly. Oops, tightly. Need an ly there. And then going down, one down. Let's cross that one off to say we did it. Not nastily would be nicely, I would imagine. Number 1 down. Let's see if that works. N-I-C-E-L-Y. Yes, you can finish the rest of those crossword hints on your own. Now this says, fill in the gap with the list word. After being as quiet as a mouse at Mum's office, I will something around at the park. You can work out the rest of those fill-ins on your own. Antonyms mean the opposites. I've written it there in case you forget what it means. So the antonym of darkly, you have to find a word up here that means the opposite to loosely and the opposite to rudely. This is level J, list 7, and we're doing the day 3. These are our words today. We've got mouse, house, horse, nicely, safely, bravely, neatly, tightly, brightly, fairly. Now you can see on the end of these words we've got an SE, 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 and we've got ow, ow, and or as our sounds. Now the reason we have an E on the end of these words is not because we need that E to make the previous vowel long. It's because they thought that if words ended with an S, people would think it was a plural. So they already had this where we had the word cat, and if we add and that means one cat, and if we add an S to the end of the base word, we have cats. which means there's more than one cat. So when they came to the words that ended with an S, like horse, house and mouse, they decided that if they ended with an S, people would think there's more than one horse, more than one house, more than one mouse. So they decided to put the E after the S to show that they are singular. And then if we want to make them plural, we add the S after the E, just like we add the S to the base word here. Now we do have some irregular verbs. So mouse is one with, these are nouns, sorry, some irregular nouns. And so mouse becomes mice when we make it into a plural form. We don't usually say mouses. But when you get down here, you'll see that mouse can also be an acronym. So if we take the first letters of these words that I've highlighted, manually operated user selection equipment, this is referring to the mouse that you use on a computer. So there's a little bit of an argument happening as to whether the acronym MOUSE, mouse, as we commonly say, refers to manually operated user selection equipment, or whether they called this a mouse because it looks like a mouse, especially if you have a cord attaching it to your computer. So the plural of this acronym, if it is an acronym, would be mouses, although most people probably say mice. So if you were going to the shops to buy more than one, you'd probably be right if you used mouses or mice. I don't think there'd be a problem. Now let's go back up here and have a look at these other words. All of these other words that we have all end in ly, and generally when a word ends in ly, it forms an adverb. Not all the time, but most of the time it forms an adverb. So nicely, you could do something nicely, safely, bravely, neatly, tightly, brightly and fairly. They'd all need to be used with a verb. And what we also have in a lot of these words too is we've got the E at the end of the word making the previous vowel long. So you've got an I, A. Now here we don't have the E in there, so we're just got the EA for the long E sound there. The long I sound is with the IGH, and here we've got air, AIR in there. Now this E here is a very busy E, because not only is it making the previous vowel make its long sound, it's also making the C say S. So we quite often use CE at the end of a word for the sound, and we quite often use SE at the end of a word for the Z sound. And sometimes we just have that SE at the end just because we don't want people to think that these are plural forms. So let's have a look at reading, sounding and writing, spelling and writing those words. We've got mouse, mouse, M-O-U-S-E. So we cover M-O-U-S-E and then check to make sure it's right. So it's very important that you read these words, that you sound them so you know the letters that you have to find for these sounds. We also spell them and then we write them to check that we do know how to spell them without looking at the word. So plurals, we know generally we add an S, but as we just discussed, sometimes we have irregular nouns in where we don't add an S, we actually change the word from mouse to mice. So this acronym piece we've spoken about. Now you have to use any two adverbs from the list in a sentence down here. So any of these words ending with ly you could use in a sentence here. So you're not only just going to have to use the adverb, you'll have to use that adverb with a verb. So you might say someone plays nicely, someone drives safely, they fight bravely, they work neatly, the shoes fit tightly, the sun shines brightly, or someone plays fairly. But you'd need to put it in a sensible sentence down there. Now verb families, we know we quite often add S So we're going houses, housing, housed. So here, if a word ends in E, we're going to make the E go away when we add the ing here, housing, horsing. So this, when you use horse as a verb, you mean someone being silly. So it would be, he often horses around, oh, he's horsing around again, or yesterday he horsed around a lot. Now when you use it as horsed, as past tense, you can hear it's making a bit of a t sound, horsed, but you know to write the ed there. Now because the e is already there, remember you're really only adding a d. You don't have to add another e. Now you're going to finish these sentences with a list word. The surf lifesaver swam something to rescue the swimmer. So you're adding whatever word fits in there. And sometimes it might be have an extension too. So just be aware of that ed making that t sound, or in housed, it's actually making the d sound. There's quite a lot in this list for you, so I'll let you get started. This is level J, list 7, and we're doing the day 4. And today we're looking at adverbs, and they tell us how, when, and where. So an adverb is a word that we use to describe a verb, and it usually ends in ly. So he was dressed nicely. Not all the time, but most of the time they end in ly. Hello, I'm Anna, adverb, and I know how, when, and where. So they add a little bit of detail to the verb. So we're adding to the verb, and we know a verb is something we can do. So here we're looking at the verbs drive, play, hug, run, see, dress, write, walk, sing, yell, sleep, and teach. So to make those verbs more interesting and to give the reader more detail, the writer can add an adverb to the verb. So we've got drive carefully. So as we said, a lot of the time we add ly to a base word to make it into an adverb. So drive carefully on the wet roads. Here you've got to add the ly, play fairly, and you might put something like with your friends. Warmly hug your mum and dad, or run quickly to catch the bus, or see clearly. We've got dress nicely. You've got to finish these phrases off on your own. Write neatly, walk slowly, sing sweetly, yell loudly, sleep soundly, cheerfully teach. So you have to think about the how, when and where these are happening and finish off these